Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this 4-episode series brought to you with underwriting from Taylor and Francis, we're talking about how academic libraries can demonstrate value to campus administrators. As we know, the digital transformation, the rise of accountability and assessment, austerity measures after the 2008 market crash, and the evolving scholarly communication landscape have all contributed to a more unified strategic orientation and departmental accountability across campus. The publication of ACRL's Standards for Libraries and Higher Education in the fall of 2011 addresses this shift with practical guidance, and yet many libraries have more work to do to be seen as valued partners in their institutions. Joining me to discuss the whys and hows of a robust value proposition are Hilary Craiglow, Library Consulting Practice Lead at Attain Partners, Dr. Jeffrey Gold, President of the University of Nebraska System, and Emily McElroy, Vice President of Academic Relations at Taylor and Francis. But before we get started, if you want to keep up on the latest programming from the Authority File, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter for information on the current and previous month's episodes. To subscribe, simply visit choice360.org, click on the newsletter sign-up banner in the top right corner, and select the Choice Podcast Updates option. While you're there, you can also sign up for other newsletters published by Choice. In this first episode, we talk about why libraries need to demonstrate their value, why some still struggle with this imperative, and what new concepts now resonate with leadership. Okay, Emily, Hillary, and Jeff, welcome to the program. So why don't we start with the obvious? Why do libraries need to demonstrate their value to administration? Why is this both a short-term and long-term goal? And Jeff, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for the opportunity to join this esteemed group. It's great to be with you, and it's important to address this subject head on. As anybody and everybody in higher education and in so many other sectors of our society know, that our universities have been living in a resource-constrained world for a long time. In spite of changes in state share of instruction funding, in spite of changes in tuition, the cost of delivering quality higher education continues to go up, and we are endlessly finding ways to trim budgets. And hence the dialogue that we're having today about the importance of our libraries and the way we can continue to demonstrate value is of great importance.
Okay, so Emily, I'm going to kick that over to you. What's sort of the why? What else, behind that why?
Well, I think, a lot of it does tie exactly to what Jeff just said in terms of the issues and tough decisions. And I think that one of the things is that no matter how well respected that you are in the institution, it's a struggle, tough decisions. And I think that if I were to enter a library tomorrow as a brand new dean, I that hadn't been demonstrating its value, I would immediately review what data the library has been collecting,
Hmm.
see how its strategic plan aligns with the institution, and craft some quick stories to share about what is working and what needs to change. And some of those changes might require financial investment when funds are already limited, but I think starting those conversations is right away is important. Because no matter what, in the long term, you want to support the direction that the institution is heading in all aspects of its
Hmm.
mission. So I think that what you want to be seen as a vital connector for faculty and students.
Right. Jeff, is the heart of the matter financial, or are we talking, strategy as well? I know a lot of it ties into budgets, obviously, but
Well, it's very easy to come down to the finances of it, but it really has to do much more with the prioritization of how resources are applied within an organization, which is directly connected to what I call the value proposition. As we are financially constrained, and unfortunately, certainly given my decades in higher education, particularly in public higher education, that has always been the case, that demonstrating the value of convening individuals, of being repositories of large amounts of data, supporting particularly the research mission, but also the undergraduate and graduate teaching missions, and demonstrating that value is really important. First of all, as pretty clear, it's a lot easier to cut than it is to invest in areas of growth these days. And the concept of what a library is and what it does has evolved. And we've got a number of other individuals who are involved in this podcast today who have different thoughts on that. But certainly going back to the days the dinosaurs ruled the earth when I went to college, the library was a very, very different place that served a different set of roles. And now that has continued to materially evolve. I think all parts of higher education are under pressure, and anything that we can do to put precious resources, into the front line, out of administrative support, but into the teaching and learning mission and into the research and scholarship mission, is where the value is going to be derived in higher education. And so the more we can express the transformational role of libraries and collections and data sources, et cetera, the easier it's going to be to create that alignment.
Excellent. Thank you. And then Hillary, are you seeing similar trends among your clients as you're out there speaking with people?
100%. And it's so great, Jeff, that you're such an advocate for libraries in this incredibly challenging and increasingly kind of competitive resource environment. Definitely seeing this. And those libraries that seem to excel better understand that universities kind of have shifted from this traditional line item funding to more performance-based resource allocation. And those that can demonstrate themselves within, as Jeff explains, this value proposition, do better in this really tough environment. Short-term, libraries face these budget pressures. Jeff touched on them. We're dealing with declining state support. We've got enrollment changes. There's rising costs. There's changes to federal funding. And administrators really require concrete evidence that the investments that universities make in libraries yield returns. Mm-hmm. How do we support student retention? Are we increasing research productivity? Are we helping the competitive positioning of our universities? And those libraries that are not kind of able to articulate that may risk being viewed as more discretionary expenses rather than the essential infrastructure that we know we are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So it may seem apparent why libraries need to be able to communicate their value to administration, like we just talked about. It remains an issue for a lot of institutions. Emily, why do you think libraries struggle with this? Not only in the execution, but in the understanding of why it's vital to their functioning. Is it culture? Is it just lack of communication between campus departments? What do you think it is?
Well, in my experience, everything begins with culture. And this needs to change because we have limited time to update our narrative on what libraries are doing or capable of doing if they have additional resources. And I just want to draw on several examples just from what I've observed over the years. And I think the first example is at various institutions, libraries have really struggled to adapt to new campus leadership, whether it's a president, provost, or a vice president for business and finance. And when you're under the same expectations for many years, you can become complacent because questions about collection costs or the number of librarians who are teaching and things like that might not have been asked for a long time. One of those individuals might have worked at a previous institution where the library is poorly managed, and that's their only experience. So you have to adapt to that and start over with new leadership. The other example is when library leadership begins at a new institution. What works at one place might not work at another. I worked at a library that never had to defend its collection budget, which was unlike, I think, any other library that I've ever known. And then when I went to my next one, the provost was very focused on how our collections compared to those of our peer and aspirational peers. And that was a great model for me as a collections librarian because we were behind and she wanted us to grow and we had plenty of that data. When I went to UNMC, I had to take a different approach from those other institutions, and that was fine. It was just the needs were different. And so being able to also make that switch is important. And then finally, this is really practical, but libraries tend to focus on library jargon or they rely on people's love for libraries and overlook what it means to those who make data-driven decisions every day. That's why I really struggle with any library impact or annual reports I see that show numbers without context. If you show a figure for ebook downloads, it doesn't mean much if you don't show the data over a specific period of time. Has it gone up or down? What's the significance of increased gate counts? And I realize it's basic, but this happens at a lot of libraries. And really communicating that value requires sophisticated storytelling that moves beyond usage statistics to demonstrate successful outcomes, not just for students and faculty, but for the overall community.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Hillary, anything you want to add to that? I see you kind of nodding along with what Emily's been saying.
That resonates quite a bit. And I think similarly, I think libraries struggle with value communication due to a number of different dimensions. There's professional culture, and I think structural disconnection from institutional decision-making, understanding that value proposition that Jeff talked about. The library profession historically emphasizes service excellence and intellectual freedom as inherent values, which I think can sometimes create a culture where questioning that contribution can feel a little uncomfortable or even antithetical to our core values. So this kind of culture intersects with what I see as a significant knowledge gap about university operations. I think many library professionals lack training or understanding in institutional finance or the strategic planning or the administrative priorities. They may not have internalized that value proposition. They may not understand how the university generates revenue, what pressures the president is facing from boards or state legislatures, or how budget decisions get made. And I think this can create a real communication barrier, like Emily was saying about jargon, where libraries speak in terms of professional library metrics, while administrators think in terms of things like enrollment management and research productivity and cost per student served and reputation, and another way of thinking about our universities. And if I can just go a little further, I think sometimes libraries operate in organizational silos with some limited cross-departmental collaboration. So our schools at our universities regularly interact with like a department office or research offices, and will coordinate with multiple academic units. And libraries will have those relationships, but they often function as a self-contained unit. And that isolation may mean that they're missing opportunities to understand how their work connects to this broader institutional outcomes and relationships.
Right. Excellent. So Jeff, I think, Hillary's been, kind of hinting at, where the sort of priorities are and, libraries communicating to campus leadership. I'm wondering if you could help us understand how those communication fundamentals have shifted. What are some of the, new concepts that resonate with campus leadership?
Well, first of all, I strongly agree with what both Hillary and Emily described. And, you talk about building relationships with the leadership of the library and with the key individuals, with the, major donors who have supported the libraries in an individual way over time. You look at the average tenure of university presidents, provosts, chief research officers. Then you look at the turnover of deans, including library deans and directors and others. And it almost feels like you're in a continual cycle of change. And that once you build that relationship, I've been really, really fortunate over the decades of leadership, or I've been very pleased to have solid continuity. And even when there's been change, there was wonderful internal candidacy that could support the legacy that had been built. I'd never tried to take that for granted because those relationships are really key. But coming back to your question, which is really an important one, the library leadership, I believe, needs to have a solid seat at the table at the level of all of the academic deans, so they're seen or heard, and allow the library leadership, whether it's a dean or whatever the appropriate title might be, to fully understand the challenges and opportunities that a given university or university system is going through at any given time, to be able to benchmark decision making against peer institutions. Not that it's always possible to achieve those benchmarks at a given period of time, but at least to understand and certainly not be tone deaf to the ongoing existential challenges. If the university is going through a major reduction in force or going through a significant fall off in enrollment or research funding, et cetera, to be asking for a large increase for facilities or staffing just doesn't feel like it makes sense unless there's a solid business model. And that gets me to what I think to be a rather important point is the world of academia, at least the traditional world of academia, has not always been focused on using business model type planning for either growth or programmatic change. Having spent decades of my life in healthcare, nobody brings forward a new business model who does not have a return on investment or a calculation of net present value or something both not just programmatically, but in financial terms as well, even if it's something that is not going to generate revenue. There needs to be some way of demonstrating either the social mission, the academic mission, and to put it into the context. Because, at the end of the day, when we add up all the individual unit budgets, we at least need to know where we're going to be over the next several years. And so having the discipline to be able to say, if we build this building, or if we hire these people, or if we, give you an example, and make an investment in an archive collection for one reason or another, A, what is it going to cost? B, where are the dollars going to come from, both operating and capital? And is there some sustainability to the model? And if there's not, what's the social good or academic good that needs to come out of it? And, to me, that's a very healthy conversation to have, because it's no different than if the dean of architecture or medicine or law comes to me and says, Jeff, we need to build this program or add a wing to my building, or, whatever else might be on the table.
You just heard from Hilary Craiglow, Library Consulting Practice Lead at Attain Partners, Dr. Jeffrey Gold, President of the University of Nebraska System, and Emily McElroy, Vice President of Academic Relations at Taylor & Francis. This series is provided with underwriting support from Taylor & Francis. Remember, if you want to keep up on the latest programming from the Authority File, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter for information on the current and previous month's episode. To subscribe, simply visit choice360.org, click on the newsletter sign-up banner in the top right corner, and select the Choice Podcast Updates option. While you're there, you can also sign up for other newsletters published by Choice. Join us next week when we look more closely at the nuts and bolts of aligning a mission with campus leadership, including the hallmarks of a strong relationship and the specific benchmarks, stories, and metrics that administrators are looking for. The Authority File podcast is brought to you every week by a small but extraordinary team, including Choice's advertising manager Pam Marino, digital media producer Sabrina Kofer, and digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.